A homeless girl collapses, a millionaire saves her, but the millionaire's mother says, "She looks like your dead daughter." Minutes later, they discover something shocking. Leave a comment and rate my story from 0 to 10. Your opinion is very important. And become a member of my channel for access to exclusive videos. The desperate cry echoed through the town square of Harmony Creek, Montana, like lightning striking a clear morning sky. Jake Sullivan, 30, stopped dead in his tracks during his morning jog, his heart pounding as he heard that familiar, panicked voice. It was his mother, Dolores, 58, pointing with trembling hands towards a small figure collapsed on Main Street. "Jake, hurry! There's a child having a seizure." Dolores's voice cut through the air like a knife, causing several people to turn and stare. Jake sprinted towards the indicated spot, his muscles tensing instinctively. When he got closer, what he saw froze him for a few seconds. A girl, about 4 years old, lay on the rough pavement, her small body racked by violent spasms. Her lips were blue, her skin as pale as paper, and she wore clothes so old and torn they looked like rags. "Oh my God," he murmured, carefully kneeling down. The child was so thin and fragile she looked barely 2. Her brown hair was tangled and dirty, matted to her small face with cold sweat. Dolores arrived right behind him, breathless, tears already streaming down her face. She looks so much like—" Her voice broke, unable to finish the sentence that would tear at her son's heart. Jake didn't need her to finish. He knew exactly what his mother was thinking. The resemblance was disturbing, painful, impossible to ignore. This unknown girl had features that stirred memories he had tried to keep buried for 2 years. "We need to get her to the hospital. Now," he said, gently lifting the child in his arms. She was too light, worryingly light, like an injured bird. "Mom, get the car keys." During the drive to Harmony Creek General Hospital, Jake watched the girl in the rearview mirror. She had stopped convulsing, but was breathing with difficulty, her small lips still bluish. Dolores held her little hand in the back seat, whispering old prayers she had learned from her own grandmother. "Who is this child?" Dolores asked, her voice still choked with emotion. "How can such a little girl be alone on the street in this condition?" Jake didn't answer immediately. His hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, trying to concentrate on driving, but his mind was racing. The fortune he had built over the years with his ranch, all his wealth accumulated through smart investments in the stock market, none of it mattered in that moment. What mattered was saving this child. At the hospital, Nurse Betty, 45, received the girl with professional efficiency, but her experienced eyes showed immediate concern. "Severe malnutrition, signs of severe dehydration. We need to run tests, stat," she announced as the medical team took over. "Is she going to be okay?" Jake asked, surprising himself with the anxiety in his voice. "We'll do everything we can, but she's very weak. We need to determine her blood type for a possible transfusion," Betty replied, already preparing the necessary equipment. Jake and Dolores remained in the waiting room for hours. The rancher paced back and forth, his nervous hands fiddling with his cell phone without really seeing anything. Dolores remained seated, her eyes fixed on the door to the medical center, the tears drying and resurfacing in constant cycles. When Betty finally appeared, her face was pale, an expression of shock barely disguised on her features. "We managed to stabilize her, but—" She hesitated, looking alternately at Jake and Dolores. "We discovered something very unusual in the tests." "What is it?" Jake asked, feeling a cold shiver run down his spine. "Her blood type is extremely rare. AB negative with a specific subtype that we find in less than 1 in 10,000 people." Betty paused, swallowing hard. "It's the same type that was in the medical records of Lily Sullivan." The silence that followed was deafening. Dolores brought her hand to her mouth, stifling a gasp. Jake felt his legs weaken, needing to lean against the wall for support. The name of his daughter, spoken after 2 years of deliberate silence, echoed through the hospital corridors like a ghost returning from the past. That's just a coincidence, right?" he murmured, but his own voice sounded desperately uncertain. Betty nodded slowly. Of course, Mr. Sullivan. Just a very rare coincidence. But the girl is responding well to treatment. She needs to stay in the hospital for at least a week to regain her strength. That night, Jake couldn't sleep. He sat on the porch of his ranch house, looking out at the mountains surrounding Harmony Creek, trying to process the day's events. The money he possessed, the result of years of investing in the stock market and expanding his ranching operations, had never felt so irrelevant. All his wealth couldn't explain this impossible coincidence, this encounter that stirred up truths he preferred to keep buried. The next morning, Jake arrived at the hospital carrying a bag full of toys and children's books. He had spent the night awake, his restless mind preventing him from finding peace. Something about this girl disturbed him deeply, a feeling that went beyond the medical coincidence discovered the day before. The girl was awake when he entered the room, her big brown eyes fixed on the window overlooking the hospital courtyard. She turned when she heard him enter, and for the first time, Jake could see her face completely. The impact was like a punch to the gut. The delicate features, the shape of her eyes, even the way she tilted her head slightly, were disturbingly familiar. "Hi," he said softly, approaching slowly. "How are you feeling today?" The girl watched him silently for a few seconds before whispering, "Better. The doctor said I was very sick." Her voice was weak, but there was an intelligence in her eyes that surprised Jake. "What's your name, honey?" "Iris," she replied, still cautious. "Iris Santos." "Iris," he repeated, testing the name on his lips. "It's a pretty name, like the flowers." He sat down in the chair next to the bed. "Where are your parents, Iris?" The girl's face closed up immediately, a shadow crossing her big eyes. "They went to heaven when I was 2. Uncle Gene took care of me, but he got sick too." Jake felt his heart clench. "Uncle Gene? He's not really my uncle," Iris explained, her little hands nervously playing with the hospital blanket. "But he called me Little Bloom and always said that one day my real family would come to get me." "And where is Uncle Gene now?" Tears began to run down Iris's small face. "He passed out, and the men in white coats took him away. I was alone on the farm for many days until I could get to town." The story that unfolded was more tragic than Jake had imagined. An orphaned child, abandoned after her caretaker fell ill, wandering alone until she collapsed from hunger and exhaustion. "You walked a long way to get here," Iris nodded. "I was looking for food. I was hungry for a long time." At that moment, Dolores entered the room, carrying a bag with clean clothes and some homemade cookies. Seeing Iris awake and talking, her eyes filled with tears again. The resemblance was even more evident now, with the girl clean and rested. "How are you, sweetheart?" Dolores asked, her maternal voice emerging naturally. Iris smiled for the first time, a shy but genuine smile. "Are you the mother of the man who helped me?" "Yes, I am, Little Bloom." The word escaped Dolores's lips without her realizing it, the same affectionate nickname she used with Lily. Jake noticed and felt a chill run down his spine. During the next few hours, Jake watched fascinated as Iris interacted with the world around her. She drew compulsively on any paper she could find, always creating little birds and flowers. When Dolores brought colored pencils, the girl began to color everything purple, exactly Lily's favorite color. "Why do you like purple so much?" Jake asked, trying to keep his voice casual. "I don't know," Iris replied, focused on her drawing. "I've always liked it. Uncle Gene said it was because I had a special soul." In the afternoon, Jake sought out Betty for more medical information. The nurse led him to a private room, her serious expression indicating that she had important news. "Mr. Sullivan, we ran more detailed tests overnight," she began. "Iris has old scars that indicate complex surgeries when she was a baby. Very expensive operations, probably cardiac." "What do you mean?" "Someone invested a significant fortune to save this girl's life when she was a newborn. We're talking about procedures that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars." It's not the kind of treatment that an average family could afford. Jake was silent, processing the information. Who would have that kind of capital available to spend on an unknown child? Do you have any idea where these surgeries were performed? From the medical records we were able to access, they were performed at a private hospital in the state capital. But the data on who paid was erased or never properly recorded. When Jake returned to the room, he found Iris asleep, a new drawing in her small hands. It was a family, a man, an older woman, and two girls. One of the girls was drawn with wings, like an angel. The other held the man's hand. "She drew that for you," Dolores said softly, approaching her son. "I asked about the drawing, and she said she dreamed of a girl who lived in the clouds and asked her to take care of the family that found her." Jake took the drawing with trembling hands. The girl with wings had curly hair, just like Lily. The resemblance was impossible to deny, but also impossible to explain rationally. "Jake," Dolores said, her voice filled with emotion, "I know it might sound crazy, but what if this isn't just a coincidence? What if there's something bigger happening here?" He looked at his mother, seeing the same internal conflict that tormented him reflected in her eyes. "Mom, that doesn't make sense. Iris is a real child, with a tragic but real story. We can't create fantasies just because she reminds us." "I know," Dolores interrupted, "but my heart is telling me something different. Since yesterday, for the first time in 2 years, I feel a peace I couldn't find." That night, Jake hired his personal assistant Jenna, 34, to discreetly investigate Iris's past. If someone had invested so much money in her health as a baby, there should be records, clues, something that explained the mystery surrounding this child. What he didn't expect was that this investigation would reveal connections that would shake everything he thought he knew about his own life, unearthing secrets that had remained hidden for years in the shadows of Harmony Creek. 3 days later, Jenna appeared at the hospital with a disturbed expression on her face. She had worked tirelessly, using all her contacts and resources to trace Iris's past. What she discovered left her deeply uneasy. "Mr. Sullivan, I need to talk to you in private," she said, casting a significant look at the room where Iris was playing with Dolores. They went to the hospital garden, where Jenna opened a folder with documents and photographs. "I managed to locate Jean Amaral. He's a resident at the St. Vincent's nursing home on the outskirts of town. He suffered a stroke 3 weeks ago and has difficulty speaking." "What about the surgeries Iris had as a baby?" Jenna hesitated before answering. "That's where it gets strange. I found records of a woman named Violet Mendoza, 52, who worked as a midwife and nurse in rural communities. She appears in several documents related to funding medical treatments for underprivileged children." Jake frowned. How would a midwife have money to pay for such expensive surgeries? "That's what I couldn't figure out. But there's something more disturbing." Jenna showed an old photo. This woman disappeared exactly 2 years ago. In the same week that Lily... The sentence hung in the air, heavy with implications. Jake took the photograph, studying the face of a middle-aged woman with kind but determined eyes. Something about that face seemed vaguely familiar to him, like a distant memory he couldn't place. "Where did you get this picture?" "From the town hall archive. Violet used to visit needy families, always accompanied by a small child. The descriptions match Iris." Jenna turned a few pages. "But there's more. Jean is not just a retired veterinarian, he was Violet's only known contact in the area." That afternoon, Jake decided to visit Jean at the nursing home. The 67-year-old man was sitting in a wheelchair in the garden, the left side of his body partially paralyzed by the stroke. When he saw Jake approaching, his eyes lit up with a spark of recognition that surprised him. You came," Jean managed to say with difficulty, the words coming out slowly and slurred. "She said you would come." "Who said?" "Violet." Jean made a visible effort to form the words. "She always knew that you were The chosen one. Jake leaned forward, his heart pounding. Chosen for what? How do you know me? Iris, she's not an ordinary child. Tears began to run down Jean's wrinkled face. Violet told me, before she left, she watched your family for a long time. Watched? Why? Jean closed his eyes, gathering strength. After your girl, he passed, Violet knew you would need a new purpose. Iris was prepared for you. Jean's words sent a chill down Jake's spine. Prepared how? Violet had lost a daughter too. She dedicated her life. Text will continue on the next part to save others. But Iris was special. She knew you would heal each other. When Jake returned to the hospital, he found Iris drawing again, this time with an almost obsessive intensity. Dolores stood beside her, watching worriedly. She's been like this for hours, Dolores murmured. She draws non-stop and doesn't want to talk about what she's doing. Jake looked over Iris's shoulder and froze. The drawing showed a detailed sequence, a woman handing a child to an elderly man on a farm. The child growing up alone, walking down the road until collapsing in the town square, being carried by a tall man. It was as if she was documenting her own journey to them. Iris, how do you remember all this in such detail? He asked gently. The girl stopped drawing and looked at him with those big, expressive eyes. I dream about everything. Every night, the lady with the white hair tells me stories about the family that was waiting for me. What lady? The one who brought me to Uncle Jean. She said that one day I would find a family who lost a girl like me, and that we would all be happy together. Dolores approached, her face pale. Iris, honey, when was the last time you saw this lady? A few weeks before Uncle Jean got sick. She came to visit me and said it was time for me to go find you. She said the girl who lived in the clouds had asked her to take care of me until you were ready. Jake felt his legs weaken. The story was becoming more bizarre and impossible with each revelation. How could a 4-year-old child invent such an elaborate narrative and connect it with real events in their lives? That night, while Iris slept, he called Jenna again. I need you to find everything you can about Violet Mendoza, where she worked before becoming a midwife, how she got the money for the surgeries, anything that explains her connection to our family. I'm already investigating, Mr. Sullivan, but Jenna hesitated. There's something I discovered today that you need to know. Violet worked at St. Clair's Hospital in the state capital 5 years ago, the same hospital where Lily was born. The silence that followed was tense and charged with implications. Jake felt he was being dragged into a mystery much bigger than a simple coincidence. There were forces working behind the scenes of his life that he didn't even suspect existed. Keep investigating, he said finally, but be discreet. I have a feeling we're messing with something certain people would prefer to keep buried. When he ended the call, Jake looked out the hospital window at the small, sleeping figure of Iris. A child who had arrived to them through a chain of events that defied any rational explanation, carrying secrets that seemed to know more about his family than he did himself. And somewhere in the shadows of Harmony Creek, Violet Mendoza remained missing, leaving behind only fragmented clues of a plan that had been carefully orchestrated over years. A plan that was just beginning to unfold. A week later, Jenna arrived at the hospital with a discovery that would change everything. Her eyes shone with a mixture of excitement and apprehension as she approached Jake, who was reading to Iris in the garden. Mr. Sullivan, I found Violet, she announced in a low voice. She didn't disappear. She's working as a caregiver at the same nursing home where Jean is a resident. Jake almost dropped the book. What do you mean? Do they know each other? Not exactly. She's using a fake name, but I was able to confirm it through an old photo. She's been there for 2 years, since... Jenna looked at Iris, who was playing distractedly with her paper flowers. Since this all started. That afternoon, Jake left Iris with Dolores and drove to the nursing home, his heart pounding in his chest. He found Violet in the garden, delicately caring for an elderly man in a wheelchair. She looked different from the photograph, older with graying hair, but her gentle eyes were unmistakable. "Violet Mendoza," he called, approaching slowly. The woman turned, and upon seeing him, a sad smile formed on her face. "Jake Sullivan, you finally decided to look for me. You were expecting me. For 2 years." Violet stood up, wiping her hands on her apron. "Since the day I placed Iris in Jean's care, knowing that one day you would meet." They walked to a secluded bench in the garden. Jake felt he was about to discover truths that would change his understanding of everything. "Why did you do this?" he asked. "How do you know us?" Violet took a deep breath before beginning. "I worked at St. Clair's Hospital for 15 years. I saw you and your wife visiting throughout the pregnancy. I witnessed Lily's birth. I saw your love for her." Her hands trembled slightly. "And I also saw when you lost your daughter 2 years ago." "That doesn't explain Iris." "Iris came to me when she was only 6 months old, abandoned on the doorstep of an illegal orphanage where I volunteered. She was dying of a congenital heart defect." Violet paused, her eyes filling with tears. "I used all my inheritance, all my savings accumulated over years of work, to pay for the surgeries that saved her life." Jake felt the world spin around him. "Why would you spend so much money on a stranger?" "Because I had lost a daughter too." Violet's voice broke. "My Clara died at 5 years old, a victim of the same heart disease that Iris had. I couldn't save her because I didn't have the resources at the time. When I saw Iris, it was as if fate was giving me a second chance." "But why did you choose us specifically?" Violet smiled through the tears. "Because I watched you for years. I saw how you cared for Lily during her brief illness. I saw the unconditional love you had for her. When you lost your daughter, my heart broke along with yours. I knew that Iris needed a family who understood the value of life, who knew how to love without conditions." "How were you sure this would work?" "I wasn't, but I had faith." Violet took a crumpled envelope from her pocket. 3 years ago, after Iris had fully recovered from the surgeries, I began to plan. I knew you would need time to process the loss of Lily, so I left her with Jean, a good man who agreed to take care of her until you were ready." Jake opened the envelope. Inside were photographs of Iris growing up on the farm, always accompanied closely by Violet, letters detailing each milestone of the girl's development, and in the end, a blank adoption certificate, already signed by her. "You planned all this?" "Every detail. I taught Iris about you through stories. I showed her pictures from afar. I told her that one day she would find a special family that would love her as I loved my Clara." Violet stood up, taking a small box from inside her apron. "And there's something else you need to know." Inside the box was a necklace with a small purple heart-shaped pendant. Jake recognized it immediately. It was identical to the one Lily wore, and that had been buried with her. "How did you get this?" "I made the original for Lily when I worked at the hospital. It was a tradition of mine to give small gifts to the children who were born there." Violet smiled through the tears. "I made one just like it for Iris when she recovered from the surgeries. I said it was a gift from the girl who lived in the clouds and that one day she would meet that girl's family." Jake held the necklace with trembling hands, finally understanding the extent of Violet's plan. It hadn't been coincidence. Every similarity, every detail that had disturbed them had been carefully orchestrated by a woman who had dedicated years of her life to heal the pain of a family she didn't even know personally. "And now?" he asked, his voice choked with emotion. "Now you decide. Iris doesn't know any of this. To her, you are the miracle she always hoped for. But if you feel you can't love her without thinking you're replacing Lily, I'll understand." Jake was silent for long minutes, processing everything he had heard. Then, slowly, he began to smile. "Violet, you don't understand. Iris isn't replacing Lily. She's completing our family in a way I never thought possible. So, you're going to adopt her officially. We already started the paperwork this week." Jake stood up, extending his hand to Violet. But there's one condition. We want you to be a part of Iris's life too. She deserves to know the woman who sacrificed everything to save her. 6 months later, in the garden of Jake's ranch house, a birthday party was underway. Iris, now 5 years old and visibly healthier and happier, ran among the guests, her purple dress fluttering in the wind. Dolores chased after her, laughing as she hadn't done in years. Violet sat in a chair nearby, watching the scene with tears of joy in her eyes. Beside her, Jean had recovered enough to attend the celebration, his speech still slow, but his smile radiant. Jake approached Violet, carrying a special gift. "Iris wanted you to open this." Inside the box was a framed drawing made by Iris. It showed 2 women with wings, one with curly hair and the other with straight hair, protecting a big family underneath. Written in shaky letters was, "For Grandma Violet, who brought me home." "Does she know?" Violet asked, holding the drawing against her chest. "Part of the truth, that you saved her when she was a baby and that you always took care of her until she found us. She'll understand the rest when she's older." At that moment, Iris ran to them, jumping into Jake's lap. "Dad, is Grandma Violet going to live with us now?" Jake looked at Violet, who nodded with a smile. "Yes, little Bloom. Our family is finally complete." As the sun set over the mountains of Harmony Creek, Jake watched his family gathered in the garden. His fortune, built through years of smart investments and hard work, had never bought something as valuable as that moment of fulfillment. Iris had brought back not only joy, but a renewed purpose to their lives. And somewhere he knew Lily was smiling, knowing that her family had found the peace she had always wanted for them. If you liked this wonderful story, please comment. Your opinion is very important. And if you love beautiful stories, subscribe to my channel. I promise to make your day better with my videos.